This year marks the 75th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence of the Jewish state. It was on May 14 in the Gregorian calendar that Israel's first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, declared independence in what is today called the Independence Hall in Tel Aviv. Many believed that the Jewish state would be short-lived, but still 75 years on, Israel is stronger than ever militarily, economically, but at the same time facing unprecedented challenges when it comes to internal unity and cohesion. So in this program, we are going to look at Israel 75, look at the opportunities, but also the challenges. And with me in this program, I have to my right-hand side, Charlie Weimers, Swedish member of European Parliament, and Alex Benjamin from the European Jewish Association. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining this program today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I start with you, Alex Benjamin, as a British Jew growing up in Northern Ireland, working in Brussels today with the European outlook, what does Israeli independence mean for you?
It's a very big question, Thomas. It means a lot of different things to me, but let's start with the most simple. At Passover, every year we say next year in Jerusalem. And I'm privileged that in my generation, in my time, that can actually happen. And for us, it can happen as part of a Jewish state. I was in Israel about 2 weeks ago, and you just mentioned Independence Hall and David Ben-Gurion. I was on Rothschild, and I was walking up past Independence Hall, and I was looking around me, and you think about Israel being 75 years old. I think of it as 75 years young. I mean, it's an infant in historical terms. And you look around, you look at the skyscrapers, you look at what's been built, and it makes me incredibly proud. And it's also just a symbol of hope and a symbol of a resilience of the Jewish people after millennia of persecution, of adversity. We came home, and it just means so much. I'm not sure I could really adequately put into words what having a Jewish state means to me.
Wonderful. Charlie, you are neither Israeli nor Jewish, but as I understand it, Israel still means a lot to you. Why is that?
Well, let me mention a conversation I had in Tel Aviv with an Israeli friend. We were talking about, relationships, becoming a parent, and so on and so forth. And he happened to be together with a European woman. So I asked him, okay, do you foresee a future in Europe or in Israel? He told me, I want to bring up my kids in Israel. I've lived in Europe, I've seen it, I love it, but Charlie, this is the only place on earth which I could call home, which I could feel truly safe, as a matter of fact. Of course, history tells us that, but it was so striking being told that as part of a sort of very personal, private reflection of his. And I think that we as politicians and fellow human beings should acknowledge that and that should support Israel. And for me to do what I can for my Jewish friends to always have that homeland, the Jewish homeland, is, for me, it's a heartfelt cause.
Israel 75, let's face it, none of us are quite 75 yet, but we all have our memories, I'm sure, of Israel. There are associations that we make. Maybe in my case, I old enough to remember the Yom Kippur War very vividly in a faraway little village in Finland, how the community at that time, it felt almost like Finland was attacked. And I think I even have a slight, could be one of my first memories as a child, being a little bit more than 4 years old during the Six-Day War, how it affected my parents. This is it's an odd story in a way, because we are not Jewish, and Finland is very far away from the state of Israel. But Charlie, in your case, Sweden is also very far away, thousands of kilometers from Israel. Do you have what were some of your first memories of Israel?
Well, I think that was in school, when I learned about the Holocaust and also the pogroms before, all the atrocities against the Jewish people throughout the ages, and how finally, after millennia, this Jewish state was re-established, and that this was not in small part because of all the wrongdoings conducted by Europeans against Jews. That had a very, very strong impact on me, and of course, seeing those pictures, the boat with the boy looking at Israel, and also the Great Wall, the soldiers looking in Jerusalem at the liberated wall in East Jerusalem, that really affected me as a youngster.
Wow, amazing. And Alex, I'm sure you would have many memories, but I wanted to pick up on the fact that you spent significant time in Northern Ireland, and you've been working together with Sir David Trimble, Nobel laureate and a Nobel Peace Prize winner. And how would you see the similarities between what once was a deadly conflict in Northern Ireland, which today is much more peaceful and quiet, and the conflict between Israel and Palestinians? And sadly, this is one of the associations when we're looking at Israel 75, but we can't get away that there is an ongoing conflict. Right. It would be interesting to hear your thoughts from your unique viewpoint.
A lot of people think there are similarities. I would say probably the only similarity is that you have a group of terrorists in the IRA, and you had terrorists on the Palestinian side who believed that they were fighting for liberation. One of the big differences, and why it's not so similar, is that there is a case to be made. You could argue that the Protestants in Northern Ireland didn't really have, a lot of them were brought over from Scotland, and they didn't have a claim to Northern Ireland per se. You can't say that about the Jews in Israel. You can't say that my ancestors over 2,000 years ago, when we were exiled, that this isn't us just coming home. One thing that always strikes me, the difference between Northern Ireland today, which, as you noted, is relatively at peace, and one thing that I will say to Sinn Féin's credit, which sticks in my throat a bit to have to say it, but having worked with them, is what they did was they didn't move forward until the people were with them. And what I mean by that is they prepared the ground for peace. And so that when the peace process came about, the Catholics, the IRA side, were ready to make that move. If they'd have carried on inciting, as the Palestinians do, and not preparing the ground for any kind of peaceful transition or any notion that there could be a peace process, we're stuck in this perpetual cycle. So each conflict is different. Northern Ireland was a very peculiar set of circumstances. There's still a lot of tensions on the ground, but they've learned to live with each other, primarily because there were people like David Trimble on the one side who were prepared to make peace, but on the other side, Sinn Féin had laid the groundwork. Now, I don't think anyone today would say that the Palestinian Authority leadership has done anything to prepare the ground for any kind of peaceful transition or preparation for compromise with the State of Israel.
That's very interesting. I was hoping you would bring up the lack of peace education that always precedes peace between peoples.
Right.
You also brought up something quite interesting as it relates to the Protestants in Northern Ireland, and if I can follow up with you on that one, the Republic of Ireland is perhaps one of the most dedicated critics of Israel in the European Union, and we see it on and on again in voting patterns. You hinted at something that could be an explanation. Do you want to elaborate perhaps a little bit? Why is Ireland so anti-Israel?
I'll try. I'll try, Tomas. So there's a couple of reasons. One, I don't know if you know, but Ireland was one of a few countries during in the interwar period between the First and Second World War where there was actually a pogrom in Limerick. So Irish society was very strongly influenced by the Roman Catholic Church, and particularly Roman Catholicism in Ireland had an animosity, a deep-seated animosity towards Jews. During sermons, you would hear Christ killers, etc., etc., etc. So you throw that into the mix, which can take generations to undo. Then you're also looking at republicanism, which is obviously extremely strong, and the idea of armed uprising, which still has a sort of romantic notion in some parts of Ireland. And they see, like a lot of movements that try and justify acts of terror and guerrilla warfare, they seek fellow travelers, and they seek to find some kind of affinity with people. So there's this kind of romantic notion that Palestinians are cut from the same cloth as the same people that fought in 1916 for Irish independence. And I think taking that old Roman Catholic long-standing animosity, which I have to say is fairly unique to Ireland, particular set of circumstances, marrying it with a sort of anti-British, anti-colonial, Republican tradition, I'm not in the least bit surprised. I say that as a holder of an Irish passport, but it's certainly not a good place to be pro-Israel, not a good place to be Jewish, particularly. In fact, the community there is getting smaller and smaller each year. But there are good people there. There's people like Jackie Goodall, I don't know if you know Jackie, who's fighting very, very strongly in Ireland. And I hope in time, as Ireland matures into a democracy, that we can put some of this animosity to the side.
Well, it's interesting because just a few years back, Ireland and Sweden and Belgium and perhaps a few other countries would be in the same group as very problematic for the Israelis. But things have changed in Sweden, and the question is why. And I think, Charlie, you are probably one of the best positioned to explain to the viewers why Sweden is changing its course.
Well, if we go back in history, we can see that Swedish relations with Israel has shifted throughout the years. At times it has been very warm, but it's also gone to ice cold at certain points. I mean, if we go back to the founding of the State of Israel, recognition by Sweden was delayed because of the murder of Folke Bernadotte. That was a low point indeed. But then for many years there were good relations, not least between the ruling Social Democrats and the Labour Party in Israel, which were sister parties, still are, even though I see more photos from their sister party in the Palestinian Authority nowadays, the party of Mr. Abbas. But something happened in the aftermath of the Six-Day War. One might say that Israel was too successful in 1967. So Olof Palme of the Social Democrats, he altered Social Democrat Israel policy. And it was built on a sort of infatuation of revolutionary movements and a thinking that, punching from beneath is being the little guy. That's the good thing, per se. And ever since, the view in Israel has been based much upon whether you adhere to a post-colonialist thinking or a more civilizational thinking when you look at how does Israel function, what rights are enshrined in their laws, is it a democracy, and so on and so forth. I mean, if we look at it today, the Social Democrats their foreign minister was banned in Israel for many years. And her successor, Ann Linde, she defrosted relations a bit, but still international development aid to the PA was at an all-time high during these years, and any calls for greater scrutiny of these funds were denied by the government. And the Social Democrats, of course, they used it as a vote winner because of the Arab immigration to Sweden. Using this as a sort of shtick was highly effective. Now we do have a government which I'm proud to say has a very, very clear line on Israel, very pro-Israeli line. All four parties of this cooperation in Sweden, and we've seen proposals to strengthen anti-terrorism efforts, strengthen the work against anti-Semitism, and to cut funding to the PA with between 40 and 60%, which is quite something. So I have quite good expectations now for warmer relations between Stockholm and Jerusalem.
On a follow-up question to that, and I think that was quite remarkable, that 3 out of the 4 parties that are in a way supporting the government, I mean 3 are in the government and 1 is playing a supporting role. 3 of those parties were for an embassy move to Jerusalem, which is remarkable. But how realistic do you think this is? Will we have to wait another 75 years before the embassy will be moved to Jerusalem, or?
I really do hope not. No one wants this to happen more than me. I mean, there is support for it in 3 parties, as you say, but if we look at how Swedish governments usually work, there is a foreign office which is kind of structurally conservative. It does not want to rock the boat. And for Sweden to move its embassy would definitely, rock the boat. So together with a Swedish hesitancy not to be in the forefront on foreign policy in the EU context, that makes me somewhat pessimistic that this will happen in the short term. What we could work for, and we are working for it in the parliament, is to have this seriously looked at, an inquiry by the government, and then to start debated between the majority parties. That I think could happen, and it's about building alliances as well. if we are able to reach out to other EU member states that are contemplating this move, maybe Sweden could not be alone. I don't know what this, what this anxiety comes from to be in the forefront. Normally that's a good thing in many respects, but you can't know everything what goes on in the mind of a foreign minister, so I won't guess why, but we could work together with others on this.
On this note, if you allow me to make a statement, I mean, Israel 75, we are talking EU-Israeli relations. I think it would be so appropriate if the European Union would decide to mark the 75th anniversary, saying that, well, now we as a bloc should recognize Jerusalem. That's part of a normalization process between any sovereign nations in this respect, the European Union and a third party. At least one can hope, one can have a dream, and I think it's overdue. But Alex, I mean, there is another story to Israel 75, and we are not trying to live in a bubble. As much as everything that we've said is true, Israel is not in a good place at the moment. We are looking at something which could almost be, defined as a civil war. And as friends of Israel, of course, we are concerned. What are your comments or reflections? So how do you think that this can plan out?
Okay, let me start off by saying that when I was growing up in our household, there was a golden rule, which was we didn't air our dirty linen in public about what's going on in Israel. Clearly, that's changed over the years, and now I've come to the realization that clean laundry only exists in the detergent adverts that you see on TV. What I mean by that, 75 years, we said it. It's young, it's in its infancy. And yet, I'm still incredibly proud of a debate which is taking place in Israel. And I think viewers, and I think we should keep in mind that there's a very robust debate taking place in Israel right now. But let's look at our neighbors and see how they deal with robust debates. Let's see what happens in Syria or Iran or Lebanon or Egypt or to a lesser extent Jordan whenever there is any kind of societal upheaval. There's no debates. If there were protests, they're quickly bludgeoned out. So I'm kind of proud of the scuffs and stains as Israel feels its way and it matures. Personally, I'm not going to take up too much time because some of the issues are quite technical. So let's just keep it nice and simple. There does need to be a modicum of judicial reform. Having said that, if you're going to muck around with the judiciary, there needs to be trust in the existing system. We now have a untried coalition made up of some, I'm going to use the term extreme elements as they would be perceived in broader Israeli society, plus with a prime minister under indictment who wants to change the judicial system. Now, anyone from an external point of view looking at those circumstances would go, it's probably not the best idea. Okay, having said that, there's a clear case that a government duly elected by the people has a right to pursue its agenda without being constantly blocked by a judiciary. So there does need to be some kind of balance found. Yeah. It's a very, very worrying situation, but I believe firmly that Israel will weather the storm. Because there's one thing, Charlie was alluding to it earlier on in the Six-Day War. You spoke about your memories of Yom Kippur in 73 in Finland. Then we go back to the State of Independence in 1948. What's the common thread in each of those? The backbone, which is the Israel Defense Forces, the backbone, which is the Israeli army, which never mind the politics of left, the politics of right, whatever extremes Israel goes to on the political pendulum, that remains its backbone. And I'm convinced and assured that Israel will continue to stay strong, the pendulum, as inevitably happens, after a vigorous swing one way or the other, always settles. We have to go through this turbulence. I don't see there being a civil war. I do see there being a lot of poison which needs to come out of the system, but I believe that Israel is strong enough, mature enough to get through this difficult time.
I hope the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister was watching, and they certainly are, and have the good judgment to recruit you as the spokesperson, because no one could have said it better. That was well put, Charlie. We have about 1 minute to go. Any final thoughts, Charlie, on the current situation? I know 1 minute doesn't give you justice to comment on such a complex issue, and also to say that we will dedicate the whole program of the European report to the current judicial reforms. But any final observations?
I very much agree with Alex's analysis. It's spot on that this is a very sensitive point in which to pursue reforms like this. Nevertheless, Israel does not have a written constitution, and therein lies the problem. I would to see a constitutional assembly or something like that evolve from this may be quite optimistic, but as David Ben-Gurion said, in order to be a realist, you must believe in miracles.
Thank you, Charlie Weimers. Thank you, Alex Benjamin. If only the world was made up by sensible people like ours, the world would be a happy place. But on a serious note, we need to continue to support the Jewish state and wish its leadership all the best, and all the best that is unity first and foremost.
Amen.
This has been another program of the European Report. My name is Tomas Sandell, and we will see you again next month.